Jupyter 0.6 is finally released. It comes with a couple of nice new features and also bug fixes and documentation improvements. So here we are looking at the changelog, and I will do a quick tour of all of these new features right now. So the first one is the interactive input support. What that means is typically if you would in Python try to write something like this in Jupyter before, that would not work because this requires what we call the stdin request to be able to block on a user to enter an input when they are prompted to, let's say, enter the name. And funny enough, I think it's probably one of the most requested features since the beginning of Jupyter. And the good news is that that's finally available in Jupyter 0.6. So I prepared a little notebook here to showcase a couple of these new features. So let's try it live right now. So now if I execute this, I can see that there is this little box just like in a regular Python asking for the name. I enter my name, and instead I can get the name. And here, let's say, of course, PWD. I enter something hidden. So I type hidden here, enter, and in a new cell, let's do PWD. And you see that there is hidden. It also works with getPass. So yeah, that's really good news in Jupyter 0.6. So you would typically find this kind of input, the usage of the input function in Python pretty much everywhere in intro courses about Python, and people will be like complaining that it would not work in Jupyter, but yeah, now it's the case. So it's really great to see that landing now. So let's go back to the changelog. Let's see. Yeah, we have new REPL options. So this actually comes from Jupyter 4.4. So Jupyter 0.6 is based on Jupyter 4.4 and Notebook 7.4. And in Jupyter 4.4, there were like a couple of improvements to the code console to add a couple of new options here. So I will probably link to a dedicated video about Jupyter 4.4 and Notebook 7.4 new features. But here, what is interesting in the case of Jupyter is that all of them are also available via URL parameters. So if you have used the REPL before in Jupyter to, let's say, embed code console in your website, you've probably seen this page here in the docs. And with these new options, there is something that we can almost now call as a single executable cell. So if you want something that looks like this, it's now possible to use all of those new options, combine them together, and get something that looks really much like a single executable cell. So let's see it live here in the notebook. So by the way, in the notebook, you can use an iframe. So you can actually show an iframe in the notebook. So we're going to use that now to just for the code demo. Here I have the code snippet from the docs, almost the same, just tweaked a little bit so that it works with iframe from IPython display. And you see all of the new parameters here directly in the URL. And if we execute this, let's execute. Yeah, we see the code console now displayed. If I print something, let's say np version, execute, and now since we are kind of in single executable cell mode, now every time we're going to do a change, it's going to clear the previous cells, only show the output, and that lets you iterate on this code. And you noticed also that the code stays in the cell, which is quite handy. If you want, you can still use the menu here to change like the prompt to the right or put it back to the left. And this lets you iterate on code more easily. Let's say you want like to show a widget. Let's install IPy widgets first. Okay, now that it's installed, we can remove it. So yeah, we have a slider from 0 to 100. But let's say I would like to change the min and the max, so I can do this and execute. The code stays in the cell. The output changes every time the cell is executed. So we have this kind of very nice feedback loop where you can iterate quickly on some code, and this is particularly useful in teaching if you want to show, let's say, a thought process to students and how they can iterate on their own code using a kernel in Jupyter in general. So yeah, a quick note about the new report. There is also a couple of new buttons here to restart the kernel, clear the cells, to choose a different kernel if you want, and also the one I would just noticed before about the prompt cell location so that you can change. Okay, back to the changelog. The next section is the kernel indicator and logs. So one of the main pieces of feedback from users was that sometimes if something would be going wrong in the kernel, that let's say crash or an error that would be obscure, it would be difficult. It was difficult to users to know what was happening. So in Thread 0.6, there is a new button here in the notebook toolbar. If you click on it, it opens the log console for the notebook. The log console is typically where you would find logs about what is happening in the kernel, if the kernel wants to report some logs. So in the case of the PyDI kernel, if you switch the log level to info, you will see which packages are loaded at startup. And you will also be able now to know if there is an issue that causes the kernel to crash. So believe it or not, but this piece of code makes the PyDI kernel crash. So let's just try it. So let's first close the log console and run the cell. Okay, so before in SwiftLite, we would be just looking at a star here in the prompts and a kernel status busy, but it would be difficult to know like really what is happening. But now we have a couple more UI elements that kind of tell that there is something wrong happening. So here now the kernel indicator it's like a red cross, and there is also this blue background here on the log console. So if I click on one of the two, let's say this one, it opens the log console, and we see that there is a little bit more detailed kind of error message that something went wrong. And typically here, it's pretty clear that this is like a fatal error. So there is really no other way to continue working on that notebook than restarting the kernel. So we can actually do that now. So let's set the log level to info. So we see the other messages that the PyDI kernel logs. Then click on restart. And you see that, if you choose a different log level, you may see more information in that log console. So yeah, another kind of quality of life improvement for users, so they kind of know more about what is happening in case they are having issues. Okay, so next in the changelog we have something about clearing the browser data, but we'll get back to that one at the end. Before we can quickly look at this one here, the loading indicator. So it was kind of also not very clear before in Jupyter Lite when you would go to a URL, and sometimes in slow connections, it would take some time to show you something on the screen. So here, if I open that in a new tab, you see that now there is this loading indicator that shows up. But since it was pretty quick, maybe I can show do a kind of manual slowdown just so that it takes a little bit more time to load. Yeah, you see that there is this loading indicator now when the page takes a bit more time to load. So at least users are not just facing like a blank screen. And the nice thing is also reacts to the theme. So here the user had the dark theme. Click on reload. The loading indicator is also a theme accordingly. Okay, so let's revert back to this. Nice. Okay, so next one is about setting import and export buttons. So this comes directly from Jupyter Lab 4.4. In the settings editor, there are two new buttons, export and import. Let's say you make some changes here out of the code console. You want to enable this setting here. You can now export it. It will export it to a file that will contain the changes you made to your setup. And then you can click again on import to re-import the same changes that you made before, maybe in a different environment. So I will link to a video about the Jupyter Lab 4.4 and the Notebook 7.4 features where there is a demo of this. Typically in Jupyter Lite is very useful because you may want to play around with the UI and change a couple of settings here. And then when you are happy with a set of different settings than the default ones, you can simply export the settings and then put them in an overrides file. So typically these kind of files here, docs. And this overrides.json file is the place where you set all of different kind of settings you would like to have in your deployment. So you can start from a Jupyter Lite instance, make some changes, export the settings, and then configure overrides.json to have the settings that you want by default. Okay, cool. So next we have the addition of the plugin manager. This is more for advanced users. So from the settings editor, you can click here, plugin manager. So it doesn't let you enable or disable plugins directly. So if you don't really know what plugins are, in Jupyter Lite, it's pretty much almost everything you see on the screen. And some power users may want to play around with them and maybe learn more about like what is actually part of their Jupyter Lite that they are currently interacting with. So yeah, that's why it's called advanced. It's more for advanced users, but it's good to have it there. Also, it can be useful in some cases. Next, we have the improved multi-site content management. What that means is, so before in Jupyter Lite, if you had two different deployments, let's say on GitHub pages, let's say you have your username, github.io, and then you have one repo with a different, like a specific set of notebooks, and then another repo with different set of notebooks, extensions, and so on. And then you will go to one, create a file, and then it will show up in the other one as well, because the underlying storage will be shared between the two. This is not the case anymore in Jupyter Lite 0.6, because Jupyter Lite 0.6 now uses the base URL, so pretty much this piece of information here to better separate two storages for the two different sites hosted under the same domain. So you should expect less issues like about like files being kind of shown from another place. This was creating quite a bit of confusion to some users. So now it's 16.0.6. Okay, and finally, um, a couple of fixes related to accessing the file system from Python notebooks. So let's open this notebook here. So typically, if you would like try to write to the file system, uh, like, let's say like in the for loop 1000 times, you will run that notebook here, and then you would open a new tab, a browser tab, and try to make something similar in the other tab. Then at some point you will find some issues because there will be like a concurrent access to the file system. So that was causing issues with some workflows, but it will now be fixed in 0.6. But if you find more issues like this, don't hesitate to report them on the repo for sure. So a quick note on the extension system used in ScriptLite. So you probably don't need to know a lot about this as a user, but this version drastically changed how plugins were registered and extensions were kind of working together with kernels and also regular ScriptLite extensions. So to summarize all of this, let's say it's just been improved overall. So hopefully this will also help integrate more features more easily in the future. So yeah, just a quick note about this. Okay, and the last one, briefly talked about that before. It's the update to ScriptLite 4.4, the notebook 7.4. There is a dedicated video about these new releases, so I'll post a link in the description. Maybe it's easier to get to know about the new features that these two releases bring. Some of them are directly reused in ScriptLite. All right. Okay, there is this one that we skipped because it's clearing like all of the data that would actually clear the notebooks I had here. So now we can do a demo of it. Let's say we change the theme to another one, like this one, and I have a couple of other notebooks. So we see here that there are a couple of notebooks that are already available by default, but also new ones that were created by the user. And there is a new menu entry here in the help menu. It's clear browser data. And it's going to show you this warning here that is going to clear everything you have in your browser data, browser storage, related to settings. So let's say the theme here, and files and notebooks, so the ones that we created there. So if you click on clear, it's going to reload the page. And now you see that the notebooks we created are gone. The theme is back to light. So yeah, it's useful. It was also requested for a very long time, but be careful when you use it because then you won't be able to find your notebooks that you created yourself anymore. So yeah. All right, that was all for the changelog for like most of these user-facing changes. There is also the troubleshooting guide which got updated. So here you find information about like what we just saw, like the clearing browser data may help to recover from a bad state. There is also a quick note on how to check if a package is compatible with ScriptLite and the two Python kernels. And also the thing about the kernel logs that we saw. For lots of you who actually maintain a ScriptLite website, there is a migration guide, and this section here from 0.5 to 0.6 lists like most of the kind of major changes that happen. So there are quite a few of them compared to previous releases. This is mostly related to the extension system rework that we just discussed before. But you will also find some other information like we saw also before about how the browser storage works when you have multiple sites into the same domain. This also affects the settings which are stored in the browser. And then API changes is a section a little bit more for those of you who actually use like components in the downstream projects or try to use only part of it. So, or if you have like a custom kernel, there are really like a couple of small changes that you need to perform, but they should all be documented here. So yeah, I'll let you have a look at those if you are kind of concerned by these changes. Okay, so yeah, if you find any issues or any question about this migration from 0.5 to 0.6, don't hesitate to open a new issue here on the repo or a new discussion. That also works. I think that's it. We covered most of the important features in this new release. So again, like if you want to learn more, go to the docs. There is the changelog here in this dropdown. Otherwise, you can just search through the light on most of the search engines, and you should be able to find the docs easily. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.